What if everything you thought you knew about Ron Weasley was a lie? Because somewhere in the shadows of fan theories and online debates, there's one idea so strange, so outrageous, it almost sounds like a joke. But what if it isn't? What if Ron Weasley is actually Albus Dumbledore? That's right. The wise, mysterious headmaster and the goofy redhead sidekick might be the same person. It's called the Ronbledore Theory. And while most people dismiss it as fan fiction gone too far, the deeper you look, the more unsettling it becomes. The parallels, the symbolism, the weird little clues scattered across the books that no one paid attention to until now. Because what starts as a quirky idea turns into something much darker. A theory that rewrites the legacy of the wizarding world and forces us to ask a terrifying question. What if Dumbledore has been lying to everyone from the very beginning? Let's break it down. The Ronbledore Theory didn't come from a book, a movie, or even a leaked note from J.K. Rowling. It was born in the corners of the internet, on fan forums like MuggleNet, LiveJournal, and early Reddit threads, long before fan theories became clickbait. It started as a whisper, just a few people noticing odd similarities between Ron and Dumbledore. A broken nose, a limp, the same sly humor and soft spot for sweets. Most fans laughed it off, until someone decided to dig deeper. They pieced together quotes, reread entire chapters, and started finding strange patterns. Things most people missed, like how Dumbledore seems to know just a little too much about Harry's friendships, or how Ron, in the early books, sometimes shows wisdom and insight that seems out of place for a 12-year-old. The theory really picked up traction around 2004, when a detailed post laid out all the similarities in a single timeline, suggesting that Ron, after surviving the war, used a time turner to go back in time and reinvent himself as the very mentor he once looked up to. It was wild. It was ridiculous. And somehow, it kind of made sense. Even today, the theory still has a cult following, not because it's likely, but because it's strangely poetic. Like Rowling left a riddle hidden beneath the entire series. And the deeper you go, the harder it is to unsee. But what really sold people on the theory was a chessboard. It all starts with a game of wizard's chess. In the Philosopher's Stone, Ron doesn't just play the game, he becomes a piece. He steps into danger willingly, sacrificing himself so Harry and Hermione can move forward. It's one of his first major heroic moments, and it's easy to overlook. But to some fans, that moment was everything. They believe the chess scene was symbolic, not just of Ron's bravery, but of his future. He plays the knight, sacrifices himself for the greater good, and in doing so, mirrors the exact kind of move Dumbledore would make decades later. Think about it. Dumbledore was always 3 steps ahead, always manipulating the board. He sacrificed himself to protect others. He made impossible decisions, the kind that weigh on you for a lifetime. Sound familiar? In that one chess game, Ron shows not just strategy, but foresight. He sees the bigger picture, something most kids his age never could. And he doesn't hesitate. He steps up, takes the hit, and sets the tone for the kind of man he might one day become. The kind of man who leads quietly, from behind the scenes. The theory claims this wasn't just foreshadowing, it was prophecy. Because in the game of chess, the knight sacrifices himself so the king can win. But what if the knight becomes the king? And if that's true, it raises an even bigger question. Was that chessboard the first glimpse of Ron's real destiny? Now, here's where things get weird. people started noticing strange physical overlaps between Ron and Dumbledore. Little details that seem random at first, until you line them up. Both are tall and lean, with long limbs and big hands. Not exactly rare traits, until you dig deeper. Ron's got red hair. Dumbledore, in his younger years, is described as having auburn hair, a deep reddish brown. As he ages, it turns silver, but the connection is there. And then there's the nose. Ron breaks his nose multiple times throughout the series. Quidditch accidents, fights, you name it. Dumbledore? His nose is famously crooked, as though it had been broken more than once. Coincidence? Maybe. But it gets stranger. Both limp. Ron injures his leg during the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, a permanent injury, mentioned again later. Dumbledore, though rarely shown limping in the films, is described in the books as having a slow, deliberate gait in his older years. And then there's the eyes. Both are described not by what they look like, but by what they see. Ron is often observant in ways people miss. Dumbledore, always watching, always 10 steps ahead. There's a shared sharpness there, as if they're both looking at the world from the same point of view. Individually, these details could be shrugged off, but together, they start to feel like puzzle pieces, left behind for someone bold enough to put them together. But none of it explains how this transformation could even be possible. Until you realize, in the wizarding world, time is never what it seems. This is where the theory leaves reality behind and dives straight into time-bending madness. Because if Ron and Dumbledore are the same person, how does that even work? Simple. Time turners. Fans who believe in the Ronbledore Theory say that after the Second Wizarding War, after Fred dies, after the loss, the trauma, the chaos, Ron becomes disillusioned, maybe even broken. He's seen too much, lost too much. And with the wizarding world in ruins, he does the unthinkable. He uses a time turner to travel decades into the past, not just to escape, but to start over, to guide the future, to shape events from behind the scenes, and eventually, to become Dumbledore. It sounds insane, until you remember, time turners exist. They're real canon. Hermione used one in her 3rd year. But what most fans forget is this: the Ministry's time turners were destroyed, except for a few that were never accounted for. What if Ron found one? Or built one? What if he pushed it past its limits, breaking every rule of time and magic, to become the only person who could truly protect Harry from the beginning? That would explain Dumbledore's eerie calm, his strange emotional distance, the way he always seems to know what's coming, and yet never stops it. Because maybe he already lived it, and maybe the cost of saving the future was leaving his past behind. Physical traits are one thing, but personalities? That's where this theory gets eerie. Ron and Dumbledore both use humor to deflect. Ron cracks jokes in the middle of danger. Dumbledore delivers cryptic one-liners even in the darkest moments. It's not just comedy, it's a shield, a way of coping with chaos by making it feel manageable. They both show fierce loyalty. Ron would walk through fire for his friends, and does. Dumbledore, despite all his secrets, protects those he loves with relentless dedication, even when it breaks him. They're both strategic, more than they first seem. Ron isn't just the comic relief. In chess, in battles, and even in conversations, he's often the one who notices what others miss. He plays the fool, but he thinks like a general. Dumbledore, he orchestrates entire wars with subtle moves. letting pieces fall exactly where he needs them, even if it costs him everything. And then there are the small things, their shared obsession with sweets. Ron hoards chocolate frogs. Dumbledore has a soft spot for sherbet lemons. Both carry childhood comforts into adulthood, as if clinging to something simple in a world that's far too heavy. But here's the real kicker. Both of them struggle with jealousy, regret, and deep emotional wounds. Ron feels overshadowed, insecure. Dumbledore is haunted by the loss of his sister, the fallout with Grindelwald, and the burden of power. Different scars, same pain. It's like Ron's flaws didn't disappear. They just aged, softened, hardened, mutated into something older, wiser, and lonelier. And if that's true, if Dumbledore is Ron, shaped by time and tragedy, then it means we've misunderstood both of them completely. Because they were never just side characters. They were the same soul, watching the story unfold from two different ends of time. And yet, the real proof might be hidden in the words Rowling wrote herself. If this theory were just about physical traits or personality quirks, it could be dismissed as coincidence. But the books, the actual text, may be hiding something far stranger. Let's start with the Mirror of Erised. When Harry asks Dumbledore what he sees, Dumbledore answers, "A pair of thick woolen socks." It's a classic Dumbledore moment, whimsical, mysterious, and completely unbelievable. Fans have long speculated he was lying. But if he was once Ron, if he lost everything in the war, then maybe he really did long for something as simple and human as warmth, safety, comfort. Maybe those socks weren't a joke. Maybe they were grief. Then there's the Goblet of Fire. There's a subtle moment where Dumbledore looks at Ron with a strange, lingering expression, just for a second, after Harry's name is called. Nothing is said, no action taken. But it's as if he's seeing himself, watching his younger self panic. And what about Order of the Phoenix? Dumbledore avoids Harry like the plague, claiming he's trying to protect him. But that same year, Ron matures rapidly, stepping into a leadership role, showing deeper understanding and emotional awareness than we've seen before. It's almost like Dumbledore remembers what Harry needs to become, because he lived through it himself. And even deeper, there's a moment in Deathly Hallows when Harry reads Dumbledore's obituary. He learns that Dumbledore was once deeply flawed, arrogant, stubborn, wrecked by guilt. Not the perfect mentor, but someone who had to grow into that role the hard way. Sound familiar? Because that could just as easily describe Ron, a boy who started as insecure and impulsive, and slowly grew into someone selfless, steady, and wise. The theory says these clues weren't accidents. They were breadcrumbs. Tiny fragments of truth that Rowling left behind, hidden in plain sight. But even with all this, there's still one massive problem. And it's the reason most people write this theory off entirely. Now let's be honest. For all its mystery and poetic symmetry, the Ronbledore Theory has some serious cracks. For one, the timeline doesn't add up. Dumbledore was born in the late 1800s. Ron Weasley? In 1980. That's a century apart. Even with a time turner, there are limits. The books make it clear that tampering with time is incredibly dangerous, and time turners weren't built to go that far back. Then there's Dumbledore's entire backstory, his family, his sister Ariana, his duel with Grindelwald. Those are canon events, deeply woven into Wizarding World history, and none of them mention Ron. So unless Ron somehow invented a completely new identity, built an entire fictional past, and convinced the entire magical world to believe it, the theory falls apart. And yes, J.K. Rowling has publicly denied the idea. She's laughed it off in interviews. But to some fans, that only makes it more suspicious. Because when has Rowling ever revealed her secrets before they were ready? So, is Ron really Dumbledore? Probably not. But maybe that's not the point. Because whether or not the theory is true, it speaks to something deeper. That Ron, the underestimated best friend, the comic relief, the kid who always stood in someone else's shadow, may have been far more important than anyone realized. And maybe Dumbledore wasn't born wise. Maybe he had to earn it. Through love, through loss, through time. So no, Ron probably didn't become Dumbledore. But what if he could have? What if the real twist in the story is that the boy we thought we knew had the heart of a legend all along? Because in the end, whether it's fact, fan theory, or fantasy, the Ronbledore Theory proves one thing. No character in the wizarding world is ever just one thing. And sometimes, the greatest magic is the story we choose to believe.